Tuesday, September 20th, 1966. This course on the Bhagavad Gita.
We shall take up the 6th chapter of the Gita, which deals with meditation. We finished this chapter before vacation. We'd like to give a summary of the chapter. It is one of the most important chapters in the Gita, dealing with meditation. This chapter first gives the prerequisites for meditation. What are the qualifications necessary for one who wants to live a meditative life? Then how to meditate, the techniques. Then what happens if one succeeds in meditation? Then the common problem, how to deal with the wandering mind. What to do because the mind becomes restless. And then if one fails in meditative life, fails in the sense, if one does not succeed completely to reach the highest, what will happen to him? Will he be a loser? Will he be a failure in this life and in the life to come? These are the 4 important sections. The first thing, which is more important to us, to many, what are the qualifications, what are the prerequisites for meditation? It is interesting, prerequisites for meditation is doing work in right spirit. That is the most important thing. The first line in the chapter says, one who can do work in the right spirit, that means with spiritual outlook, is as good as a person who has given up all works and become a monk or has gone to the forest retreat. It is first thing is that it is as good as one is as good as one who has gone that way. It is because one who has been able to do works in the right spirit with a spiritual outlook, he is far advanced in spiritual life. So much so that one might say, the Gita says, if you look to the text, that if one can do work in right spirit with a spiritual outlook, it is exactly as good as one who can be absorbed in meditation. Of course, in the commentaries, to bring in a systematic philosophy, commentators will say that if one can work with spiritual outlook, one will get one's heart pure, and with pure heart, one will realize truth, will succeed completely in one's meditation. Shankaracharya would say that work will give you self-purification. Swami Vivekananda would say that work itself will give you realization. What can be done as a form of worship? What can be done as a form of prayer? What can be done as a form of meditation itself? Form of worship, to bring in that same attitude which you bring in when you are before the altar. Do every work with a reverence, with an eye to perfection, and all the while remaining calm and serene. Don't become restless. It's a form of worship. Brother Lawrence would be doing his works in a form of worship, the practice of the presence of God. He would do all work as if he was in the presence of God. It's a form of worship, form of prayer, thinking that everyone is an image of God. To serve anyone is serving God. And through that service, you will try to become close to God. It's a form of prayer. And then there is the form of meditation. said everyone is a symbol of God. Through works, you try to think that it's a form of meditation. This is from high spiritual standpoint. But work has other utilities from the standpoint of ordinary persons. Work is a great self-discipline. We have so many angularities. These angularities must be rubbed off first before we can expect to make our mind calm. Some persons are irritable. Some persons easily become disturbed because they are so proud. Many just disturbing factors are in our minds. These things must be rubbed off. These things must be smoothened before you can expect to have real meditation. And so when we are in work, when we come in contact with other persons, many problems arise. Then we know how little we are. Then we know how unspiritual we are. We see ourselves. Then we may try. There's an opportunity to try because we've come face to face with our failings. We may or may not try, but we are forced to smoothen our angularities. Otherwise, life will become miserable. Just to avoid that, we are forced to do that. If one is irritable, if one has ill feeling against others, yes, one will suffer. Through suffering, one will know that it does not pay to have hatred against anyone. You must be calm. You must get rid of that failing. In this way, many angularities are smoothened. As such, it is extremely important that one should work and work in the right spirit with a spiritual motive. One should work to develop one's spiritual qualifications or spiritual life. So it is said, if one to live a meditative life, just do your work in the right spirit. When you have got qualification, when you have sufficient inner strength to remain calm under provocation or under difficulties, then it indicates that you have developed some qualification or some inner strength. And when you have sufficient inner strength, the meditation will be easy. So to get that qualification, one should do work. And when you have got the qualification, you will be so much absorbed in meditation, then question of ordinary work does not come. And it will be impossible for you to do ordinary works. When it is said that after you have developed the qualification, no work is necessary for you, it is in the sense that you can no longer do ordinary works. But you do work in a higher work in a different way. Ordinarily, we appreciate very much when a person goes and do some social welfare work. We praise it very much because we cannot think of any higher form of work. Why? It is as good. One can do much greater work if one can pray really, one can pray powerfully. By prayer, one will do what others can do by ordinary activities. Or if one has developed his spiritual life very much, by his very presence, he will bring blessings to others, blessedness to others. One has not to do all these things. Yes, to give medicine to the sick, give education to the ordinary persons. Yes, that is a form of work. But one should not forget that there is higher form of work. What is the purpose of this giving ordinary help? One should be kept alive. One should have education so that one can develop higher pursuits. But many persons do not develop higher pursuits. If you give medicine and if one does not live a good life, he will fall sick again and again and again. You do not do any substantial good. Hospitals and dispensaries are not the signs of civilization. They are the diseases of civilization. Because with so-called civilization, you live such an artificial life, then the cases of disease increase. But how to remove that thing? How can help? How one can give real help to a person? If one can touch one's life, if one can transform one's outlook, that's a much greater help. So those who have developed great qualification for meditative life and have become successful in their meditation, They do not work in the ordinary sense, but they do work, but in a higher sense. Swami Vivekananda wrote in one of his letters. It was strange that he wrote that way. You know, he had so much compassion for people. He would ask his disciples to go and serve the sick, and thereby you will develop your spiritual life. And because of his compassion for people, he would preach and would try to develop the spiritual life through others, through lectures and so on. And in one of his letters he writes, I'm tired of all these things. But not that I'm really tired. I want to do works in a different way. Perhaps the next phase will be not through works, but through touch or through presence. He knew that it could be done. Ramakrishna would do that. Ramakrishna's greatest achievement was by touch, he could transform lives. So did Christ, so did Buddha. So there are persons, there were persons who can by their very presence give benediction to others. Literally they do that. But because we do not know that, we only think if one is at the head, leader of the social service work, become a member of Red Cross Society, then you think you are doing great work and the people will applaud. So here when the Gita says that when one has developed his spiritual life so much that he is free from work, ordinary works follow automatically. He has not to make an attempt. Ordinary persons want to respect from work. We have no time for meditation. So they want time. It has been found that if you give enough time for meditation to a person who has not developed his ordinary qualifications for meditation, he will not be able to meditate. He will be daydreaming. He will be in fantasy, or his mind will give him trouble. So therefore, it's a great necessity that for the beginners to be able to do work in the right spirit. That will stabilize one's life, one's outlook. Then that will be the foundation on which one can build one's meditative life. To do meditation, the initiative is necessary. So the Gita says, raise thyself by thyself. Thou art your own friend. Thou art thy friend. Thou art thine enemy. How can yourself be your enemy? Well, when your mind is not under control, you are your own enemy. When the mind is under your control, then you are your own friend. And the greatest enemy of mind, of ourselves, we find as a mind, when you get all these advantages of spiritual life, but our mind does not go in that direction. Swami Vivekananda met a monk who was wandering for 30 years. Swami Vivekananda asked him, why did you go from place to place for long 30 years? Why did you not sit down at one place and meditate? That man was very honest, and he said, my mind did not give me rest. Perhaps he became monk, or he took to meditative life while he was not ready for that. So you are suffering from the restless of the mind. So in his case, his mind became his enemy. Otherwise, it's a great opportunity, especially in India. One could get means of livelihood, rather one get one's food and shelter at any place. One could meditate, but he could not. He would be going from place to place. So that your mind must be your friend. That means the initiative must come from you. Unless there is the initiative, however help you get from outside, you don't develop your spiritual. You cannot develop your spiritual life. So it is said everything was favorable to me, but my mind betrayed me. So the Gita warns that you must have that initiative. You must have the high aspiration for spiritual life. With a lukewarm aspiration don't do. It cannot be a side thing of life. It cannot be a substitute for a psychiatric treatment or psychoanalysis. When the mind gives trouble and you have not the spiritual aspiration, you want to cure these things. But you cannot cure it unless there is the spiritual aspiration. You cannot meditate. If you meditate, you will do harm to yourself. because the mind is not responding to spiritual aspirations. So it is necessary that you must have spiritual aspirations. It should be developed first. Spiritual aspirations are developed when you do work in a right spirit. It is said unselfishness is God. When you do work in the right spirit, you develop unselfish spirit. Really self-purification is unselfishness. Even without meditation, if you make it a point to be unselfish, you make it a point not to hate anybody, you simply cultivate that spirit. We must not have any ill feeling against anyone. If you do that, it will be better than meditation without any preparation for it. Because your mind will become composed thereby. Mind becomes very, very serene if you develop that spirit, if you develop love for one and all. If you cannot do that, at least I wish one should have no ill feeling against anybody. Buddha said simply, by having developing love for one and all, you will develop serenity. So much so, then from that you will get the enlightenment, Buddhahood you can get. A disciple of Ramakrishna said, because in everyone there is the divine. So if you consider that, if you look upon everyone as the embodiment of the divine, then you cannot have an ill feeling against anybody. If you develop that spirit, same outlook, simply by developing that outlook, you will literally be able to get the highest realization. So that is necessary. If one cannot do that, that to the extent one succeed in developing that composed outlook, goodwill for one and all, it will be great help. Other things are necessary. One must have some endurance. One must have that feeling. One must have a little stability of mind. One should not be easily disturbed. One should not be weather conscious. There are some persons are so weather conscious. It is hot today, and it is cold. And here one is cold, one feels heat, and so on. Become so weather conscious they cannot concentrate their mind. Or much more prestige concerned. One is so much anxious about the preservation of one's honor. One easily feels that one has been insulted. One should not have anger under any circumstances. These things should be developed. These things one may not develop perfectly. One will not be able to develop perfectly unless one has realized this self. That will come at the end. But in the beginning, you must have certain degrees of development before you can really meditate. With this qualification, one should try to meditate. For meditation, it is necessary you should go to a quiet place. The Gita says the quiet place must be in a forest district or on the bank of a river where it is cool, not like the sea beaches. In the bank of the rivers in India, it is so quiet. You may not see any person even. It is so quiet. Or to go to some forest retreat. Or if you cannot do that, Ramakrishna used to say, find a room in the corner of your house where it is less disturbing for you. If you cannot get that, find a room, find a piece of shelter in the corner of your mind. Just if you have not any other place to go for solitude, try to develop an attitude. Then you can keep your thoughts to yourself. Find shelter in the corner of your mind. In any case, it is necessary that it should be in solitude. Even in the crowd, you can enjoy solitude. You don't feel interested what others are saying. It is said that if you observe silence for a long time, you will find no interest in what things are going on outside. If a person scolds, you won't feel it. You just don't feel interested in all these things. However, that you develop spiritual silence. Otherwise, it will be simply a disease of the mind. If you observe silence, then it must be with a spiritual motive. That silence would be utilized by thinking of the Lord. So if you have no other opportunity to be quiet, just try to be quiet within yourself. Just forget what things are going on outside. Cultivate that spirit. Gradually you will find that you can find rest within yourself. Then there must be seat firm seat. There is a description how the seat should be made. That may not concern you so much. Then what sitting? Important thing is one should sit erect and it should be easy posture. So those who cannot sit in a lotus posture, there is no harm in sitting on a chair, provided one sits erect and sits easy. Then the important thing, what should be meditated on? The Gita at one place says, meditate on the self. At another place, the Gita says, meditate on me. Here the Sri Krishna was saying, Sri Krishna was a divine incarnation. If you cannot meditate on the self, which seems to be an abstract idea, meditate on some concrete subject, say some incarnation, Buddha, Christ, and so on. Psychologically, it is so true. What you think you become. If you think of Buddha, Buddha means enlightenment. Previously, he was Shakyamuni. Afterwards, when he got the enlightenment, he was called Buddha. That means he is a person who has reached his enlightenment. He has become altogether different when he reached that state. So when you think of Buddha, you will think of the enlightenment, the state of enlightenment. Naturally, you will become like that. Or if you meditate on a great saint, you will partake of some of his qualities from the simple psychological truth that what you think, what you become. So the Gita at places says, think of the self. At another place, the Gita says, think of me. It is a more concrete idea. Many persons cannot think of an abstract idea. Many persons cannot think of formless God, however intellectually sound it seems to be. But it becomes snobbish because we cannot meditate on an abstract idea. If we think that we shall meditate on formless God, we begin to think of sky or the ocean or some of the sky or so on. Some concrete form we take. A mental image must be, necessarily become concrete. So for many persons, it is necessary that the object of meditation should be something concrete. Then one should not go to extremes in one's life. One should not observe too much hardship, nor should one be in luxury and great comfort. Some persons in India, I think everywhere, Christian monks also will do that. It's a senseless form of asceticism they would be doing. I read that some Christian monks, in the winter time, they come out of their cell and in the open air when snow was falling. That's the bodily torture. I don't know in what way it will help on spiritual life. In India also some would be doing, especially in the time when Buddha was alive. Buddha saw some persons doing simply physical asceticism, and they would take pride in that you are doing so much asceticism. They would identify spiritual life with that ascetic ability. So much so, I've heard of a monk, one of our monks was telling me, he was in the Himalayan district. Then there was an ordinary monk, and he would meditate sitting on the water, on the water of the Ganges, even in winter. Then there was sometimes discussion with the greater Swami, who had developed more spiritual outlook. About another person was praised more than he, and he got enraged. He said, "Let him do spiritual practice like me, say, standing on the water in the winter." Just see, from his answer you could see how much spiritual he was. He became so disturbed. So many persons, some persons at least, do that. In India, there are some persons who show physical fit, sitting in a lotus posture for 12 years, or standing on one's feet for so many years. Many persons would go to see, vulgar persons would go to see him. And here, even in civilized society, press reporters will publish these reports with glamorous light. That then these are the yogis. But serious persons would not pay any heed to them. So Buddha said that if you want to have music, stringed music, the strings should not be pitched too high, nor should it be pitched too low. You want to bring up music. So in life also, in spiritual life, don't be in luxury. Don't practice too much hardship. Spiritual life deals with the mind. You must try to have your normal health. If you cannot get things, that's a different thing. You depend on God, but try to live a normal life, by which you will be able to preserve your normal health. it is extremely important. So Gita emphasized that. If one person be without sleep for whole night, one cannot practice yoga. One can be without sleep whole night if one has succeeded in yoga. If a person has reached the highest state, superconscious state, he has not to sleep anymore. Ramakrishna will sleep very, very little. Whole night he will be thinking of God, or he will be in an ecstatic condition. But for ordinary persons, one should have sufficient sleep. Not one should sleep too much. Reasonable amount of sleep one should have. So sensible in that respect, Gita is. Then it says that you should meditate on your object of meditation. It might be the self, or it might be the teacher of the Gita, Sri Krishna, or it might be any other chosen ideal. Then one should, when one would try to meditate, mind will be going to become restless. So when the mind becomes restless, try to bring the mind back to your object of meditation ceaselessly. Mind will naturally go astray. Many thoughts will be coming, but don't receive those thoughts. Be indifferent to those thoughts. And when all of a sudden you find your mind has gone wrong, then try to bring that mind to the object of your senses. And it should be done slowly and steadily. It will not come at once. You cannot do that violently. Many persons, by trying to do that violently, just break themselves to pieces. One cannot meditate for 8 hours at once. Well, afterwards one can. In the beginning, it is extremely necessary. One should do for a very little time, and then afterwards one should increase it gradually. In the beginning, if one does for a long time, even then emotion will come. Then one will find it difficult to control one's emotion. From the subconscious mind, many things might come. Very, very difficult thing. So the Gita's practice is just work in the right spirit and do your meditation, not going to extreme hardship, not going to extreme luxury, and then try to meditate. And it should be slow. It will be slow process. In this way, if one does, gradually mind will be under control. Then we talked of that not to be disturbed by others, not to remain calm under all conditions. When you have certain amount of control over your mind, these things will come automatically. When you have some control over your mind, then you will remain calm under provocations. You have found something within, then the words of other persons won't be disturbing to you. You will not be disturbed. You will get greater and greater strength. Then these things will come automatically. Previously, we have to try both ways. We have to try to meditate, and we have to try to, with our willpower, with our efforts, to remain calm under these conditions. In this way, when one succeeds, what will happen? Then the mind will be so calm. It will be a state of great peace and joy. It will come. It will be great peace. It will be great peace and joy, and one will have the vision. One will have spiritual experiences. But at the ultimate state, even spiritual experiences are not enough. If you have spiritual experiences now, it might not last long. Its effect also may not last long, excepting a memory will remain. It has been found one has some true spiritual experiences. Yes, it gave him joy for the time being. Afterwards, it became mere a memory, and the mind begins to play its old tricks. So when one gets the highest thing, that is a state by reaching which you do not long for anything else. You do not think anything else in the world or in life worth having in comparison with what you have got. And this is a state when reaching which one will never be disturbed by anything else. One has found one's shelter of peace and joy, which cannot be disturbed by anything else, anything outside. One has found joy within oneself. One has tapped the source of perennial fountain of joy. One has found it. And this description we find in all scriptures, at least in all Vedanta scriptures. Shankaracharya in one of his books says, one who has succeeded in one's spiritual life That means one who has succeeded to have complete meditation, to be completely absorbed. Then one finds joy inside and outside. One is full of joy. One is merged in joy, as it were. And that joy, it is so intense, it cannot be compared with anything else in the world. What was the outer indication that one has reached that state? In that state, one will find the all-pervading presence of God. One will see the presence of God in everyone and in everything. You'll see the presence of God everywhere, inside, outside. In Upanishad says, Brahman is inside. Brahman means the state of joy, embodiment of joy. Brahman is within. Brahman is outside. Brahman is on the right. Brahman is on the left. Brahman is up. Brahman is below. Brahman is everywhere. That is what happens when one has reached the highest state. But it is not a case that one remains absorbed in that condition and one has no thought for the world. Ordinary persons will say, what is that? One has become religious person, he is absorbed in his joy. It is not that. But at once he becomes so sympathetic to all people. He becomes extremely sympathetic to all people. So the Gita says, then at that time he reaches a state in which he becomes identified with the sorrows and joys of the world. When he comes down from his level or from that height, when you see a person suffering, and one finds the cause of suffering, real cause of suffering. Real cause of suffering is the undisciplined mind. And one sees that, one feels extremely sympathetic towards all people. Then one sees by difference, from that height they can see how great is the suffering of people. Ordinary persons will say, have no idea what is real joy. Then they will say, why do they call the world life is full of suffering? They are pessimists. They are pessimists. They are not pessimists. They have found the source of light. They have found the source of joy. Therefore, by comparison, they see the sufferings of people all the more. So it becomes an agony to them. So they become so anxious to help people. So the Gita says that in that state, they become identified with the sorrows and joys of the world. If they live after that highest realization, they live as a blessing to humanity. I knew a Swami from his own letters. I find recently I read his letter written by his own hands. Swami Shivananda, the second president of our order. He writes. Now it is published, and this letter was written in his own hand. That's the difference. If his secretary had written just following his ideas, that would have been a different thing. There is said, as soon as I sit for meditation, only one prayer is prayer for the good of the world. I have no other prayer. Just imagine, in his own handwriting he was writing these things. He wrote that letter, I think, in the year 1915. After that he lived for several years. He passed away in 1933. And he says that whenever I sit for meditation, it is only prayer is, only thought is that may all be happy. I pray for the welfare of all. That is what happens in spiritual life. Let us stop here. We shall finish the next rest portion after another day, if you can. Anybody is welcome to ask me a question. Yeah.
Well, you said if you learn how to meditate, you can control your subconscious mind.
You control your subconscious mind. If you meditate without real preparation, and if you meditate for a longer time, thoughts will come from the subconscious mind, which will be disturbing to you. In subconscious mind, there are good and bad thoughts. When a bad thought comes, you will be upset. But if you have developed some certain amount of control, not control, you have certain amount of joy you have found from your meditation, those things will not disturb you. So one should meditate very carefully, not for a long time. Not for a long time, that does not mean that one should do it for a minute. And there are other process by which you can keep your thoughts on spiritual subjects for a longer time. You can read books and meditate on those ideas. Those things will not be so disturbing. You can easily concentrate your thoughts on some spiritual idea that you can do. But meditation is concentration on one object. That becomes difficult. So that is the trick. Do works in the right spirit and meditate for a short time, and other time you read books and meditate on spiritual ideas. That you can keep. That will discipline your mind. That will lift up your mind to a higher level. Let us stop.